There is a peculiar sort of man who can scratch his nose perfectly well when it itches, but gets into philosophical trouble when a German doctor asks him to point at it. This was Schneider. Merleau-Ponty had a great deal to say about Schneider, and most of it becomes unsettling once you realize he wasn't merely talking about a damaged brain. He was using the poor fellow to pry open the floorboards beneath the rest of us. Schneider had been wounded in the head during the First World War. Afterwards, certain things became difficult for him. If a mosquito landed on his nose, he could swat it. If his nose itched, he could scratch it, put him in an actual situation, and his body generally knew its business. But ask him, for no particular reason, to point to his nose, and suddenly civilization had asked too much. This sounds ridiculous until you notice what the request requires. There is no mosquito. There is no itch. There is no practical reason to touch the nose. Schneider has to manufacture a little imaginary world in which touching his nose makes sense. He has to detach himself from what is actually happening and enter what could happen. Most of us perform this trick all day long and congratulate ourselves by calling it thinking. We sit in August and think about December. We stand in Montauk and imagine Paris. We hear 4 notes and anticipate the 5th. Somebody says, "Next year," and an invisible landscape immediately appears before us. Schneider's landscape had gone dim. Merleau-Ponty called part of the machinery behind this the intentional arc. It throws around us our past, our future, our physical surroundings, our social world, our possibilities. The important point is that we generally don't do this consciously. You don't wake up every morning and recite your autobiography before figuring out how to use a coffee cup. The cup is already meaningful. The room is already your room. Your hand already knows what hands do. The world arrives pre-interpreted, which means memory is much stranger than the little filing cabinet we usually imagine. We tend to think memory means remembering. I was 12. My father said this. I lived there. That happened Tuesday. But an enormous amount of the past survives without appearing as a recollection at all. It has become posture, expectation, taste, fear, timing. A way of reaching for a door handle. A way of recognizing someone's footsteps before you've consciously identified who is coming. A musician doesn't necessarily remember every hour he spent practicing a scale. The hours have vanished. Yet put the instrument in his hands and the dead hours start moving his fingers. The past has disappeared as an event and survived as an ability, that is passive memory. Or perhaps we should say the past has learned how to impersonate the present. And here Schneider becomes much more interesting, because Schneider did not entirely lose this kind of memory, quite the opposite. His habitual body still worked. He retained an enormous amount of embodied knowledge. What had become damaged was his ability to take what his body already knew and freely project it into an imaginary possibility. His past could still operate. It just had trouble dreaming. This is why saying Schneider simply lost passive memory doesn't quite work. His condition